You've done the work. You've spent long nights figuring things out, solving problems, pushing through resistance when it would have been easier to stop. You've reached places that once felt distant, almost unrealistic. And yet, even now, sitting in the middle of what should feel like progress, something doesn't settle inside you. There's a quiet tension you can't explain. A feeling that doesn't match your reality. It lingers in the background, subtle but persistent, asking a question you can't fully ignore. When people look at you, they see someone capable. Someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who has figured things out enough to move forward. But when you look at yourself, it feels different. There's a gap between how others see you and how you experience yourself internally. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, almost invisible to others. But to you, it feels real. Like you're looking at a version of yourself that you haven't fully become yet. You achieve something meaningful, something that objectively matters, but instead of feeling grounded in it, your mind pulls away. It questions the moment. It reframes it. It tells you it wasn't as significant as it looks. That maybe it was timing, or luck, or something external that made it happen. The result stays, but the meaning fades. And instead of owning the success, you begin to distance yourself from it, almost as if it doesn't fully belong to you. The thoughts don't come all at once. They come quietly, almost casually. You tell yourself it was just luck. That expectations were probably higher. That if people really understood how uncertain you feel, they might see something different. These thoughts don't feel extreme. They feel reasonable. That's what makes them hard to question. Over time, they become part of how you interpret everything you do, shaping your perception in ways you rarely stop to examine. It starts to feel like there are two versions of you existing at the same time. The one that shows up in the world, performs, delivers, and meets expectations. And the one inside, constantly evaluating, questioning, and holding back from fully believing in that external version. These two identities don't fully connect. And the more you try to align them, the more aware you become of the distance between them, creating a subtle but constant internal tension. You move forward in life. You grow, adapt, learn new things, take on new responsibilities. But internally, it feels like something is still catching up. Like a part of you is still standing in an older version of your life, trying to make sense of where you are now. And no matter how far you go, that part doesn't fully disappear. It lingers just behind you, quietly influencing how you see yourself. Even as you move upward, achieving more, stepping into new levels of responsibility or visibility, there's a hesitation that follows you. Instead of fully stepping into each level, you keep checking behind you, wondering if you skipped something, if you missed something important, if you somehow moved ahead without being fully ready. That hesitation doesn't stop your progress, but it changes how it feels. As your responsibilities grow, so does the pressure. Not just from the outside, but from within. You begin to feel like you have something to maintain, something to protect. The idea that you can't afford to slip becomes stronger. And instead of feeling secure in your position, you feel like you're constantly holding it up, making sure it doesn't collapse under the weight of what's expected from you. So you respond the only way that feels safe. You work harder. You prepare more. You think through every detail again and again. Not just to do well, but to make sure there's no chance of failure. It looks like dedication from the outside. But internally, it's driven by something else. A need to eliminate doubt before it has the chance to appear in front of others. And when something small goes wrong, even something minor, your attention locks onto it. It becomes the center of your focus. Meanwhile, everything that went right fades into the background. It's not that you choose this. It happens automatically. Your mind highlights the flaw and dims the success, reinforcing a version of reality that feels incomplete, but convincing enough to believe. Your mind builds patterns from what it notices most. And over time, it becomes trained to prioritize what feels uncertain, incomplete, or slightly off. Even when your life is filled with evidence of progress, your attention narrows toward the one thing that doesn't match perfection. This isn't intentional. It's automatic. And the more it happens, the more your brain starts believing that this small imperfection is a more accurate reflection of you than everything else combined. It's like you're navigating your life using a map that was drawn years ago. A map based on who you were, what you experienced, and what you had to do to stay safe back then. But now, the terrain has changed. You've grown, adapted, moved forward. And yet, the map in your hands hasn't been updated. So even when you're exactly where you should be, it still feels unfamiliar. Your brain is not designed to choose what's best for you. It's designed to choose what feels familiar. And familiarity doesn't always mean comfort. Sometimes it means staying in patterns that keep you slightly uncertain, slightly cautious, slightly held back. Because that's what your system has learned to trust. So when growth appears, it doesn't feel exciting at first. It feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels like risk. Success introduces something your brain doesn't always know how to process. Not because it's complex, but because it doesn't match your internal expectations. When something feels too different from what your system recognizes, it doesn't immediately accept it. Instead, it questions it. It pulls back slightly. Not to reject it completely, but to maintain a sense of control over something that feels just outside of what's predictable. Your brain is constantly asking one quiet question in the background. Is this safe? And safety, in this context, doesn't mean physical harm. It means psychological stability, predictability, control. So when your life starts to exceed what your brain expects, even in a positive way, it triggers a subtle alert. Not because something is wrong, but because something is unfamiliar enough to require attention. Your sense of identity isn't built from a single moment. It's built from repeated experiences over time. From the roles you've played, the feedback you've received, and the expectations that shaped you early on. So even if your current reality has changed, your internal image of yourself doesn't instantly adjust. It reflects what has been repeated the most, not necessarily what is most true right now. You carry your past patterns with you, even when your environment changes. Not consciously, but automatically. The strategies that once helped you navigate uncertainty, gain approval, or avoid criticism don't just disappear. They stay with you. And they continue to influence how you interpret new experiences, even when those old conditions are no longer present. Change doesn't happen by forcing a new belief. It happens by giving your brain new experiences to work with. When you begin to notice what you've done well, and consciously record it, you're not just reflecting. You're building new data. Data that your brain can use to slowly update its understanding of who you are and what you're capable of handling. One of the most important shifts you can make is learning to separate what you feel from what is actually happening. Because your emotional response is shaped by past conditioning, not just present reality. And when you treat every feeling as truth, you reinforce patterns that no longer serve you. But when you pause and look at the facts, you create space for a different interpretation. You don't need to remove effort from your life. But you can begin to reduce the extra layers of control that come from fear. The constant checking, the over-preparing, the need to make everything perfect before it's seen. When you slowly loosen that grip, even just a little, you give your brain a chance to experience something new. That things can still go well, even without overcompensating. Growth rarely feels like confidence in the beginning. It feels like uncertainty, like stepping into something that hasn't been fully tested yet. And your instinct might be to step back, to return to what feels known. But when you stay with that moment, even briefly, something begins to shift. Not externally, but internally. Your brain starts registering that this new space is not as threatening as it first appeared. Discomfort doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it simply means something is new. But if your brain has learned to associate discomfort with danger, it will react the same way in both situations. The key shift is not removing the discomfort, but allowing it to exist without immediately trying to escape it. Because when you stay with it, your brain begins to update its response. The way you label your experience changes how your brain processes it. If every uncertain moment is labeled as failure or inadequacy, your system reinforces that pattern. But when you begin to label those same moments as new, as unfamiliar but not dangerous, the meaning shifts. And that shift creates space for a different kind of response, one that doesn't rely on fear. You don't need to force yourself to become someone new. You're already changing through the actions you take. Every time you move forward despite uncertainty, you're reinforcing a different version of yourself. And slowly, the older version that once defined your reactions begins to lose its influence. Not all at once, but gradually, through repetition. The goal isn't to create a new identity from nothing. It's to align your internal sense of self with what is already true in your external life. Right now, those two things are slightly out of sync. But with consistent awareness and small adjustments, they begin to connect. And when they do, the tension you've been feeling starts to reduce. Every small piece of evidence matters. Not because it changes everything instantly, but because it contributes to a larger pattern your brain begins to recognize. When you consistently acknowledge what you've done well, you're not inflating your ego. You're correcting a bias. And over time, that correction changes how you see yourself in a more accurate way. That constant internal voice doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't suddenly go silent. But it begins to lose its intensity. Its urgency fades. It becomes less convincing. Not because you forced it to stop, but because you stopped treating it as absolute truth. And in that shift, its influence over your decisions begins to weaken. Instead of feeling like two separate versions of yourself, something begins to merge. The person you show to the world and the person you experience internally start to feel more connected. Not perfectly aligned, but closer than before. And that connection creates a sense of stability that doesn't rely on constant effort to maintain. You stop feeling like you're performing all the time. Like you're maintaining an image that could collapse if you relax for a moment. Instead, you begin to trust that what you've built is stable enough to hold. That you don't need to constantly prove it. And that trust changes how you show up in subtle but meaningful ways. Confidence, in this form, doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It's not something you need to announce or prove. It's quiet, stable, almost unnoticeable at first. But it changes everything. Because it allows you to move through your life without constantly questioning whether you belong in the spaces you've already earned. The path in front of you doesn't suddenly become easier, but it becomes clearer. Because you're no longer filtering every step through doubt. You're able to see what's actually there, rather than what your past conditioning suggests might go wrong. And that clarity allows you to move forward with less resistance. Maybe the shift you've been waiting for isn't about becoming more. Maybe it's about finally recognizing what's already there. The effort you've put in. The progress you've made. The person you've already become. And when you begin to see that clearly, even for a moment, something settles. Not perfectly. Not permanently. But enough to realize that you were never an imposter. Just someone learning to see themselves more accurately.